Australians are, I would say, of mixed opinion about the imminent visit of Milo Yiannopolous. I asked my 70-something, sincerely Christian mother if the 6 syllables Milo Yiannopolous meant anything to her, and she said yes, of course. He is the young free speech provocateur. So that's an encouraging sign. I asked her for 3 syllables to describe you, and she said young, brilliant and charismatic. So how do you plead?
Guilty on all counts. You have a very perspicacious and delightful mother, clearly.
Well, look, Milo, why don't you, for those who perhaps aren't aware of the purpose of the visit, you're coming here on the Troll Academy tour, I think it's been described as. What is your mission?
Well, I've been doing some research because I have so many Australian fans, I mean millions of them, and I've never really done anything especially for Australia. I've noticed that I have huge numbers of visitors from there, you know, viewers on my videos and people who love watching me online and reading my columns and whatever, but I had never done anything specifically for Australia. So we put a tour together with Penthouse magazine, and it's just, I mean, the response has been amazing. The idea of my talks on college campuses in America and the idea of the talks that I'll be giving in Australia is freedom and fun. We want to draw attention to the nannies, the scolds, the feminists, the social justice warriors, the far-left progressive activists who are trying to control the way that people can say what, you know, what they want to say, what we can talk about, how we dress, whether, you know, some hairstyles are racist, all this kind of garbage you hear in the media day in, day out. People are very often scared to combat it, and they don't know how. They don't know what the arguments against some of this garbage might look like, and they don't know how dangerous it is to combat some of it. Well, that's what my show's about. I mean, the response has been absolutely amazing. We're just, by the way, adding a new show in Sydney. Our Sydney show is completely sold out, so we're adding a second show on November 30th, and the book is coming out too on what is it, November 2nd, I think. So it's just been a wonderful welcome from Australia for a tour that is all about expressing yourself, having fun, and being unashamed to have libertarian and conservative principles.
Well, look, I want to talk to you about an Australian whom you have written about previously, whom I put in the same category as Milo Yiannopolous, in the sense of free speech royalty, and that is Julian Assange.
Yes.
He is not loved like you. You talk about in the book how sort of elements of the alt-right and the conservative establishment are anti-Milo, and I find the same thing in relation to Assange, that there is a kind of phalanx of emotional hostility towards this Australian, whom I regard as one of the great humans on the earth today. So I would love you to make the case for Julian Assange to those perhaps on the right who are somewhere between sceptical and hostile to WikiLeaks.
Well, my position on Julian Assange has evolved over the years. I started out thinking that perhaps he was, you know, a traitor, a danger, a risk to national security. And perhaps the last one is true, still true. But it also has emerged, I think, during the Trump election, his hostility to Hillary Clinton, who was clearly one of the most dangerous, corrupt and odious candidates ever to run for president in the United States. I mean, Trump may not be in the White House were it not for Julian Assange, which is your first strong argument for conservatives, you know. If you want to cut him some slack. He's clearly he picked a side, I think it's fair to say, in the last election, because he saw the tentacles of the Clinton machine, you know, wrapped deep around the American public, and tendrils extending back to the Middle East, you know, pandering to gays at home while taking money from Saudi Arabia, where, you know, that funds terrorist regimes that hang us from cranes, pandering to women whilst doing the, you know, all this kind of this endless. I mean, you could talk about Hillary forever, but you know, I think that Julian Assange has emerged. I think one of the reasons my opinion has changed on this, by the way, is that he has emerged as a sort of free speech, free expression champion. And one of the things that's reassuring about him, I mean, you know, you may say that some of his stuff, he personally obviously has some personality quirks. His work has extraordinary import and effect. But something that you can say about Julian Assange, which I don't think you can say about any of the journalists whining about him, is he's never been wrong. I mean, no leak of documents from WikiLeaks has ever even been accused of being fabricated or fake. You can't say that about CNN. You can't say that about the Washington Post or the New York Times. I mean, what WikiLeaks releases is real. And in many cases, they've done democracy, I think, on reflection, a great service. So, you know, I'm not going to, you know, say that I have unqualified love for the man. And in the past, I will admit, for the Telegraph in London, you know, many years ago, I wrote some very disobliging columns about the guy. But I think he's changing, and my opinion is changing with him. And I would say that the net effect of Julian Assange, even if you're concerned about individual aspects of his personality or individual things that he has done in the past, the net effect of Julian Assange has been pro-freedom, has been, and has been actually, maybe whether he intended it to be or not, pro-conservatism.
Well, I think he's making the world safer by telling the truth. And one of the things that you have talked about previously, I saw it in an interview with Pamela Geller and elsewhere, you talk about this lack of curiosity among the phalanx of mainstream media, the kind of CNN, Washington Post, even sort of Hollywood, where there is an orthodoxy of subjects about which citizens are allowed to be curious, and then there is a vast universe of subjects about which we are meant to think nothing, say nothing, ask nothing. Where do you think this profound lack of curiosity in the journalistic class is coming from?
Well, I couldn't have put that better myself. I love how you express that. There is a realm of subjects which, because they violate social justice doctrine, we're not supposed to investigate further. For instance, Islamic terror attacks, or the bad behaviour of feminists, the bad behaviour of Black Lives Matter activists. And the right is not completely immune from double standards and from selectively applying principles or whatever it is. But there's an extraordinary, as I was talking to Pamela Geller about, an extraordinary lack of curiosity from the media, an unprecedented one in the case of the Vegas shooter, about what the guy's motives were and how he got away with it as soon as they found out that he was a straight white male. As soon as he was a white guy, suddenly we knew the narrative. Suddenly it was a gun control thing. And stop asking about that 100,000. Stop asking about whether he'd been to the Middle East. Stop asking whether he'd been radicalized. Stop asking why he had a girlfriend when no shooter of this magnitude has ever, why he was so atypical of the sort of person who commits this stuff. Stop asking how he got all those guns in the hotel. Stop asking about the security guard who went missing and then appeared on Ellen. Clearly like sweating and panting, like he'd been briefed, to say certain things and not to say others. Ellen, of course, who has a relationship with the hotel chain. Stop asking all kinds of things. I mean, it was just a systematic, extraordinary failure of journalistic imagination and ferocity and insight. Compare that to the tiny, minuscule, irrelevant, admittedly odious and pathetic, but tiny threat of a couple of hundred white supremacist losers in America who represent nothing but a little outpouring of hatred from a couple of wackos, but are presented by the media as though they represented some vast grassroots uprising of anti-Semitism and white supremacy, which of course they don't. Why, ask yourself, is the media trying to present Richard Spencer, America's leading white supremacist, as though he were head of some vast underground cult? About him, we are supposed to be both curious and fearful. But when something else in the media is contrary to the social justice narrative, we're supposed to just be quiet. I will tell you, though, these things are starting to unravel, and the way that you know that is not necessarily that conservatives have been any good at fighting it or exposing it, but the left has begun to unravel under its own playbook. So the extraordinary kind of social justice feminist dictums handed down to us by the academy, by the media, and by journalists have begun to be turned and used on their own people. Weinstein is the perfect example, and that's not where it will end. The effects of Weinstein are rippling out into other industries now. You're seeing journalists have to resign. You're seeing university professors get into trouble. People who work in all kinds of interrelated, also, equally left-wing industries, as the left is forced to obey its own rules and live up to its own standards. That, I'm sorry to say, conservatives can take no credit for whatsoever. By and large, they are utterly useless at holding the left to account and utterly useless at waging these wars. All they do is just play defense all the time. But it is satisfying to see these people with such complete and total control over the rest of us start to be hoisted by their own, you know, crayon rearranging petard. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think people are sick and tired of Hollywood with its corruption and its nepotism and its meanness and vindictiveness and spitefulness and clear, utter, blatant hypocrisy. I think people are very tired of it, and they're being drawn to, you know, cultural figures like me, political figures like Trump. All kinds of unusual, unexpected, you know, things and people are rearing their heads in this era when people are just desperate to say, stop this crazy wheel of conspiracy theory and bullying, and let me just think for myself. Let me examine the facts, let me look at what's happening, and let me make up my own mind about what happened and how I should treat other people and how other people should be allowed to treat me. That individualism is the basis of all of Western civilization, the idea that we should be able to be, do, and say whatever we want, however we want, to whoever we want. And that is that was undermined for the last 30 years by the left. I'm delighted to say, and I'm especially delighted to be a part of the impetus behind this myself. I'm delighted to say this is beginning to unravel. It's all coming to a juddering halt.
Milo, we've absolutely loved having you on. You've talked about how you've made, while they've tried to crush you, you just keep bouncing back. We thought we'd gotten rid of this guy.
I'm invulnerable at this point. There's nothing they can do. I'm like Nosferatu.
I love it, love it, love it. The great news is, although we have to go now, you are coming to us. The mountain is coming to Muhammad. So we are really looking forward to it. We just admire, the thing I admire the most is just the raw guts. To stand in front of that fusillade of ballistic fire from the establishment and still to remain standing. We congratulate you. We're very much looking forward to the Troll Academy tour. We want to thank Damien Costas from Penthouse Australia for his foresight in bringing you, and I will certainly be at the show. The book Dangerous has shot to the top of New York Times bestseller list. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, you can get it at milolive.com.au. Thanks, Milo Yiannopolous, the one and only. We're very much looking forward to your arrival in Australia.
Thank you so much for having me. That was very kind of you.